Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks to the organizers and special thanks to Harshil and Shashank for joining so early in the morning. Um, I think a good starting point for this discussion is that, as some of you might know, that India has a vision of a $5 trillion economy, and a strong digital success will play a big role in sort of achieving that. Ministry of Information Technology and Electronics, MIT, published a report last year which was kind of interesting. They said that there is about $1 trillion digital opportunity in India. I think they did it with McKinsey and the government support. And towards that, the big question I think for us here is that how big a role can fintech play in that? You know, what kind of a share will fintech take in that $1 trillion opportunity? And to discuss that today, I have with me two very amazing and accomplished entrepreneurs. Harshil Mathur, who is the co-founder and CEO of Razorpay, which is primarily into payment gateway solutions for online payments since 2014 when they were founded. Within payments, they also recently launched ePOS for physical world, on the payment side. And then they also have a capital lending arm and Razorpay X, which is a new banking platform, along with corporate credit cards, etc., etc. They have pretty good traction in the market. They have about 800,000 merchants, and they process about $15 billion of transactions annually. And they've raised about $125 billion. And I also have with me Shashank, who is the co-founder and MD of Capital Float, which was founded in 2013. They are both into SME lending as well as consumer lending, so both types of loans. Over the last 7 years, they have also grown really well. They have disbursed about more than $1.3 billion in loans already. So it's, for people watching from India, more than 10,000 crores of loans. And they have raised about $143 million in funding. So with that background, let's just jump in. And my question to both of you is that, back to the $1 trillion opportunity, right? Everybody feels like India is currently the frontier fintech nation with respect to adoption or the number of fintech startups. There are 2,000 plus of them in fintech. And right from the government to all the sort of industry entities feel that fintech is a big opportunity, but how big it is, right? So maybe Harshil, you can start with your views on how big is the opportunity in fintech.
Thanks, Amit, for inviting me here. I think the fintech opportunities is largely unexplored so far. We're just getting started. If you look at the overall size of economy that India has today, like without even looking at the 5 trillion mark, even just the size of economy we have, the digital economy is hardly 3 to 5% of the overall economy. To give an example of payments alone, the entire P2M merchant space, which is your online payment gateway space, is roughly around $75 billion in India today. If you look at markets like US, one single acquirer in US does more than $1 trillion in payment volume. So from that, like the delta is way too wide, and I think while we are moving towards a delta, we are moving much faster than some of the other markets. We've seen the growth that is in the UPI space that has shown that if given a convenient and simple to use product, how fast can digital payments be accepted in a market like India? And that's the reason everyone from WhatsApp to Google to Amazon to everyone else is trying to get an entry into the fintech space in India. And I believe that the opportunity, like $1 trillion is just a start. I think the opportunity could be bigger than that. And I'm just talking about payments alone. When you combine that with wealth management, lending, banking, neobanking, I think the market is very wide open.
Right. Shashank, over to you. What are your thoughts on the opportunity? Shashank, we can't hear you. No. Are you on mute? No. Why don't you sort of log back in, and maybe I can go to the next question with Harshil, just to save time. It's a very short and hopefully a sweet conversation. Harshil, back to you while we get Shashank back online. So, India has followed a very different model, right? Like US and China have a lot of proprietary stacks, from Visa, Mastercards to Alibaba and Tencent and so on and so forth. But in India, we have this unique model of digital public goods, right? Creating that financial infrastructure. And over the last 8 to 10 years, with visionaries like Nandan Nilekani and various organizations, a lot of financial rewiring has happened. What is the role of that in the overall sort of fintech opportunity in India?
Yeah, I think those are playing a very strong role in scaling fintech. See, India is at a very different journey than markets like US or UK or China were, where you gave the ecosystem enough time to build these things themselves, and that takes time, that takes effort, and you have to realize like India in terms of entrepreneurship and the focus on tech startups is fairly new. So I think building those public goods is a good way to jumpstart the ecosystem, because we've seen that when UPI was developed, after that, like a lot of companies came around who utilize UPI as a base layer to build things on top of it. Similarly, we have seen earlier like a lot of public goods that were created, the GST and network that was created. A lot of these things helped jumpstart the ecosystem suddenly. And payment is a very base level layer. Like unless you have the right form of digital payments, the right form of online payments, a lot of follow-up things cannot happen. Like for example, uh, uh, companies like Ola, Uber, Amazon, Flipkart, all of them rely on having a seamless payment instrument at the bottom. So unless you have digital payments, it's hard to build those things on top. And India doesn't have the luxury to wait for 10, 20 years for us to first build digital payments and then build these things. The market is moving way too fast across the world. And if India doesn't leap onto that opportunity, then we leave that space open for other global players to get into. And I think India is taking the right step by building things like UPI. Now they're focused on building a digital health stack and the presence-less layer, the Aadhaar layer. I think all of those things have helped jumpstart the ecosystem very quickly, and we already are seeing results on UPI, like a billion transactions a month. I don't think any instrument across the world would have that fast adoption. The way UPI has seen, like within 2 years, you are doing a billion transactions a month.
Yet, I think whatever financial rewiring has happened can provide a very good jump start and can catapult, sort of the companies. But I feel that this is my personal view, that I feel that the work that has to be done by private companies now, right? So, for example, your company is going to be a $1 billion company soon. So will Capital Float. If we see the journey over the next few years to go towards a $10 billion kind of companies, and if we have 100 such companies, right, the $1 trillion dream can actually be achieved. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
But what does the journey look like for companies, who will sort of, go from where you are, for example, and then go towards the journey of becoming $10 billion companies?
Yeah. So the journey, like I think $1 billion in a market like India is not very hard. To be very honest, right? Like the opportunities are very deep and very wide open. Like it's a completely open market right now. And there are so many opportunities, so many niches, and like every day I look at the market and I see, hey, why is nobody doing this? Why is nobody doing that? Like there's so many opportunities in the Indian ecosystem because the market is largely unexplored so far. The global companies trying to take a pie out of it. There are Indian local companies trying to take a pie out of it. And I think what can happen in next to 5 to 10 years is anyone's bet. But one thing is for sure, that there'll be a lot of new opportunity coming in. And if you pick up any small niche, it could become a very big market in next five years as India goes through this journey. So from that perspective, I think what is important for companies like us is to stay focused, to find one thing that we can do really well. For us, it is digitization of business finance is that vision, that we want to digitize business finance. So as a lot of businesses come in, they will want to go digital. They won't want to digitize their financial flows, and we want to be part of that journey in any shape and form. So we have picked that. So what is important is to pick up that one broad vision that you believe in, and keep building things on top of it. Because India is a very evolving market. You can't just build one thing, sit back and relax, and then help you, then your company will organically become $10 billion. It is a digital playground right now. A lot of companies will come in. You'll have competition from local players. You'll have competition from global players like Google, Amazon trying to play in the same domain. So to find your niche where you can focus on very strongly and where you can constantly outperform anyone else who tries to come in. And as long as you do that, scaling to $1 billion or $5 billion or $10 billion will not be very hard. And there are companies who have proved their worth on that. Like if you look at, like, for example, e-commerce, right? Like there's enough competition from Amazon, there is enough competition from local players, but Flipkart focused on one thing and did it well and were able to secure a $15 billion exit, $15 to $20 billion exit when they did. I think similar thing will happen in fintech in various domains like payments, stockbroking, wealth management, and so on and so forth, as long as people find it strong niche that they want to focus on.
Right, absolutely. In fact, e-commerce, a lot of growth is coming, about 2/3 of the growth is coming from tier 3, tier 4 cities. I feel that fintech has yet to sort of explore that market. But very interestingly, you said about payments that the market is very deep and wide, and over 5-10 years, a lot of value will be created. But there is another school of thought where people think, and I totally not agree with that people think that payments is sort of solved in India, right? So can you share some views on why or why not that is not the right thinking?
First of all, I think I don't accept the belief that anything is solved in India. I think India is a very early in its digitization journey. And whatever we see now and feels like, yeah, this is the market that is being captured, I don't think that is true. Like India is very early in all of its digitization journey. I mean, we are just getting like telco was a sorted market till 2 years back when Jio came and changed the way it worked. Like telco is a much older, much more sorted market. But there was still a place for an upstart to come in and completely change the way Jio changed the game. So I think from that, if you compare that, I think payments is much, much early in its journey. And I don't think it will be right to say that, okay, the game is over on any front in India right now. I would agree with that.
It's fascinating, right? Sorry? Every few years, people think that something is solved. Like, for example, people said email is solved. And then Google came in and just completely rewrote the email story.
Yeah, and telco market in India, like after the 2G and 3G fiascos, people said, yeah, this is done. We have enough companies, we have enough players. And then Jio said that there was space for somebody more. Because the market is very rapidly evolving. It hasn't reached the masses yet. And similar, now if you talk about digital payments, forget the masses, it hasn't crossed even tier 1 yet properly. Right? Like the digital adoption is still fairly low. So when you look at that, there's still space for somebody to find a way to help it reach masses, whether it be existing companies or it will be somebody new, is anyone's bet. So that is one thing. The other thing I would say from an overall perspective is that while we continue to scale on the unlimited side, one thing that I do agree with that school of thought is that pure digital payment processing is not that big of an opportunity. Like you have to differentiate. There has to be a significant factor. If you're going to target back the same customers who are already digitized with an alternate option, then of course you will not make much money. What people have to find is what you have to find as a company, and that is something that we keep searching for, is to have a broader and more encompassing offering that helps us reach wider set of customers, that helps us reach wider set of market. And I think as long as you keep doing that, then there'll be so much more opportunity that can be created. As I said, like $70 billion of online payment volume is peanuts compared to markets like US and China. So we definitely have a large opportunity of payments, fintech, wealth management, everything else coming our way.
Yeah. Good to have Shashank back. And Shashank, we were actually talking about how big is the opportunity, and is payment solved, and so on and so forth. So let me ask you this, that in your opinion, how big is the opportunity, especially from a lending perspective, as you focus on SME and consumer finance?
Wait, am I audible now?
Yes, very much.
Great. Sorry about that. You mentioned at the beginning that we're chasing a $5 trillion market opportunity in India, rather the size of the economy. And I think the fact is, if you look at any country in history that has actually achieved that kind of growth, it has always been able to do so with a concurrent expansion in retail credit. If anything, if we're expecting the country to grow at 8 to 9% over the next decade, we would need retail credit to actually grow at least 2x that, right? And if you look at retail credit today in India, what does that mean? Largely where most of the banks play is in the top, I would say 50 million customers in the country who typically would have a credit card. And if you and the opportunity is actually the next billion users. But I would say at least for the next 5 to 10 years, even the next 200 million customers in India, at one rung lower on the income pyramid, are critical to having to drive that growth. If you split that customer base, it essentially falls into two categories: small businesses and consumers. On the small business side, I think various estimates place the credit gap at about $500 billion. And there's a very similar underserved credit need on the consumer side. In fact, I think less than 10% of purchases in India by consumers are financed by any kind of instrument, right? Which is a remarkable statistic of underpenetration. So you have this 200 million customer base that needs to come into the financial system for the economy to grow and reach a $5 trillion size. How is this going to happen? I think the only answer today is really technology, right? And there are two main things driving the digital reach of financial services to this base today. The first is access, right? I think today, if we look at the SME space, I mean, Harshil is enabling many of these SMEs to actually come online. There are roughly, I would say, about 25 million small businesses that actually are digitally connected in some way, shape, or form, which means they may use a smartphone, they may use a laptop, they may file their taxes online, they may use a POS machine, etc., etc. And if I look at the consumer side, the number is roughly 250 million. The second big driver is what I would call financial infrastructure, right? So thanks to folks like Harshil, the payment rails in India, which are a prerequisite for credit delivery and collections, have actually grown remarkably over the last 5 years, whether you look at POS, UPI, any of those metrics. I think the second set of financial rails that have actually come up is credit data. So now, thanks to the bureau penetration, I think we have almost 1 billion unique records now on our credit bureaus. The GST network now processes a few billion invoices every month. A large number of businesses now are increasingly getting formalized and creating digital data trails through gateways like Razorpay. So the amount of financial data that can actually be used to build good credit culture in the country is also at an inflection point. So these two forces are propelling us, what I believe to be a kind of a decade where retail credit will really lead the growth story in India.
Right. And very quick question on, because you are both into consumer as well as SME. What is a bigger opportunity, and how do you see it in terms of your growth?
Honestly, I mean, I think from my perspective it's a highly interconnected opportunity. I think the opportunity in India today is actually to finance the producer-consumer ecosystem of small businesses and individuals. And I think that is where the largest opportunity lies. I think the difference in India vis-a-vis maybe some developed markets is that SMEs are essentially individuals, right? It's largely the promoter, the family that runs that business. And so if you actually take a step back, this sort of entire, I would say, $1 trillion digital fintech opportunity you're looking at is about targeting a set of individuals who typically earn, say, between, let's say, $1,500 to $4,000 a year, who are aspirational, who are looking to grow, who are either working for a company or building their own businesses, and are looking to essentially build a better life for their families. And so, in a sense, I think the entire opportunity in India, I believe, is actually consumer. We just happen to have a very large population that's very entrepreneurial and tends to want to work for themselves. So even if we look, for example, at our own personal finance app, Walnut, right? Almost 60% of users on the app work for themselves. So it's a highly overlapping opportunity in my view.
Right. So essentially, both of you are saying that the opportunity is really large, the market is deep and wide. But let me also talk about the challenges, right? Like what we kind of understand, and as operators like you would know better. So in US, an event like Money 2020 sells for $100 billion. A podcast by Joe Rogan also sells for $100 million, right? So, like, what you is from a monetization perspective, right? So, fintech is already hard, we know, anywhere in the world, right? It's not like transportation where Uber can sort of innovate on the top without. In India or in general financial services, banks have a mode with regulations, compliance, and all of that. And there are other issues, right, with respect to digital identity, authentication, and so on and so forth. So fintech is hard. Monetization in India seems to be a big issue. Both of your companies are going to be billion-dollar companies soon in terms of valuation. How do you see that panning out, right? How do you see the whole monetization is hard problem being solved?
I think the way I would look at monetization is that, of course, monetization is a journey, and it takes time to build. Like if you expect a company from day one to find a way to be profitable, you'll not like. There's possibility for doing that in a in a traditional environment, but when you look at an oversized opportunity like the fintech is in India, it needs time to build the opportunity. Like you are right, literally nurturing the opportunity, helping it grow, helping it expand, and that's when you get the right levers to monetize it. Not to say that you can't monetize it earlier. In payments, we do monetize it from day one. We don't, for example, our cash flows are breaking even already on the payment side, and it's easy to monetize from early on. But if you want to tap into the explosive pool of growth, that takes time to nurture. What I truly believe is that, like at least today, while the market in India is not as deep at market like US, so like you said that a single podcast can sell for $1 million, it doesn't happen because, to be very honest, we are still a poor country. Most people are just coming out of that bottom poverty level to come into the middle class where they can start spending on these things. And that will take certain amount of time. We are moving in the right direction, but it will not going to happen in the next 1 year. What is right now the country requires is to build that base level rails on top of which the population can move to the next level. And so payments is one such rail, lending is one such rail, banking is one such rail. And as you keep building those base level rails, then you can expect that as large population of this country comes out of that bottom trap and moves into this oversized middle class, I think that's when you can start finding various additional levers for monetization. But if you try to monetize it too early and focus on that, hey, I want to earn $1 million or multiple $1 million into today in that space, then it's really hard for you to nurture that opportunity. And that's what everyone is focusing on. So while people keep talking about it, how consumer payments in India doesn't make any money, but like looking at the overall size of consumer payments in India, it wouldn't have scaled up the way it scaled up in last 1 year if people focus on making money. Now, once you have that, then you generate enough data, then you generate enough visibility in customers. Then these customers, nobody knew what these customers do on a daily basis till they started using things like Google Pay, WhatsApp Pay, Phone Pay, and now you know what these customers do. Now you can understand their behavior, and you can build things like lending, you can build things like banking, which can tap into the monetization opportunity. But if on day one you wanted to say, hey, I'll charge 5 rupees for every payment that happens, then nobody would even come online. So while I understand the criticism that these companies garner, I think it is required to do that on day one to bring these people. It's like discounting or cashback, that you bring these people into the ecosystem and then you build monetization levers on top. I think that will be the journey we'll see next couple of years.
Yeah, payments is a low margin business. People used to say, referring to Visa and MasterCard in the 80s and 90s. Today, Visa and MasterCard are valued more than top 5 banks in the US put together, right? So that's the story that is going to play out. Shashank, you guys wrote a very interesting blog reflecting back on 2019 on the same topic, right? Largely around growth and monetization. So what are your thoughts on this?
So, Amit, I think India is actually evolving to be a very unique market globally, because if you sort of extrapolate the trends in each of the main fintech verticals, I think payments is on its way to becoming free with UPI and sort of MDR starting to fall. Investing is on its way to becoming free with zero commission, with direct mutual fund investing. And banking, unlike the US, where there is a whole lot of hidden charges, fees, etc., is also on its way to becoming free. So the only real monetization stream, I think, at scale in financial services in India that will remain is actually lending. And while lending is exciting from a revenue generation perspective, it's hard for two main reasons, right? The first is risk, because you've got capped upside and unlimited downside. And so I think building the right attitudes, org culture, and kind of processes around being able to manage risk when using lending as a monetization lever is something that we're all quite early on from a journey perspective. And I think the second reason it's hard is it's not a naturally repeatable transaction, right? Loans and credit are very much a point in time need that arise infrequently in the life of a customer. And which is why I think the real challenge that all of us are triangulating around is how do you create engaging financial experiences for customers that create loyalty, that create affinity, and where that relationship over time can be monetized by lending as and when that customer has a certain need, right? And I think that's where many fintech players are evolving towards. And I think the big question mark is going to be who is able to actually effectively monetize their user base through lending in a sustainable fashion over the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. Now, I'm not sure how much time is left. It looks like we have finished our time contract, but the session is still going on. So maybe let me take this advantage and ask one last question, very quick one to you guys. I feel that while there are nooks and corners of opportunity that people have tapped in SME digitization, I feel that is like the big sort of, billion-dollar opportunity in India, right? And there are few companies that have started doing it, including both of your companies. What do you think? How will we go from where we are today to being able to digitize these 60 million, SMEs? Or there are different numbers in the market, but you get the question, right?
Yeah, I think as you rightly said, like the opportunity is pretty wide in the SME space, and as Shashank mentioned that we live in a country where like 60-70% of the population wants to be self-reliant, whether it's terms of running an SME shop, whether it's doing freelancing, or it's doing something else, and we are a very entrepreneurial country in that sense. So that opportunity will always remain very big. The and the major opportunity lies around bringing these people into the digitalization fold, because that's when you start generating data. That's when you start generating insights about what these businesses do, how these businesses behave. The traditional way of, for example, if you look at lending, the traditional way of lending by looking at past year's balance sheet or looking at their financial records is going to get outdated very soon, because banks are eating up that opportunity. The bigger opportunity will lie around how can you visualize how these businesses behave without looking at the past year balance sheet. So cash flow based lending, looking at their transactions history, looking at their registration journey, and how are they banking, how are they transacting, who are their customers, getting view on that. And that's where the data play comes in. So, and I think that's what all of us are trying to do, is to build those hooks that generate that data, and using those data to basically formalize these businesses, to be able to do lending on top of that, to be able to do wealth management on top of that, to be able to do other kind of services that you can build on top of that. But essentially boils down to having bringing these customers into a platform which generates enough data, which helps you understand the business really well. And I think we are moving towards a journey with and not just from our perspective, but even the regulatory push, things like GST, things like the push on Digital India, and all of those are helping bring these customers into that digital fold where you have enough data that you understand the businesses, and you can say, hey, I know what this business does, and I can lend to it, or I can give these XYZ services to them.
Yeah. Shashank, what about in SME digitization specifically, if you can quickly answer, apart from payments, lending, there is a lot of other things that have to be done, right? In terms of inventory management, APAR, so on and so forth. So what are you guys doing something in that area?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of opportunity in terms of enabling SMEs to be more digital. Now, I think where we are trying to kind of focus is helping SMEs think through cash flow, right? Because as I said, the nuance with SMEs in India is, if you go down to the largest opportunity, it's actually mostly sole proprietorships, right? Private limited companies are perhaps like less than 10% of the entire SME pyramid. And in the sole proprietor universe, its finances are largely commingled between family and business. And family also works between. And so what we are trying to do is figure out how do you provide a one-stop kind of financial solution for the proprietor, both as a head of a family as well as the person running a business. And that could mean, for example, figuring out how to meet their credit needs for the business, but also in their personal requirement. It could mean how to manage their cash flows, both for the business as well as for the family. It could mean creating the right kind of products for this individual that straddle their business life and their family life. So I think we are coming at it very much from the angle of how do we serve these entrepreneurs as individuals and come up with solutions that meet both their business and personal life.
Right. So just going to end the session, everyone who joined, you must have sort of understood by now that one of the largest companies in digital payments in the fintech space, and one of the largest companies in digital lending in the fintech space, are so long on this segment, and they say that the market is wide and deep. And I can tell you, there are 10,000 more entrepreneurs who are running these 2,500 fintech companies who also believe the same. So if you have any more doubt left about India being able to trap this $1 trillion digital opportunity, you should keep following these guys and all the stuff that is happening in the fintech space. Thank you so much, Harshal and Shashank, for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Amit.